let you know if you have to delete it later.
We thought about going to Kelowna actually, but for my sabbatical, but we ended up not going to Kelowna because we thought it might be too difficult to get to Vancouver on short notice if we needed to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty straightforward drive from here to Vancouver, except unless weather permitting, obviously, because you have to take the connector.
That was the fear, was the snow.
Yeah.
If the snow is bad, can you take a plane?
Yes. Yeah. We have an airport here. Yeah.
All right.
I'm actually not that, unfortunately I had to come back
Right.
on short notice, and was surprised to find out how easy it is to get to Vancouver from where we are.
Yeah, it's a quick trip, really, as far as trips go in the car. We've done it a few times.
Hello, Michaela. It's nice to see you.
Welcome, everybody. If you haven't yet done so, you might want to put your device onto speaker view so that you get a good view of Hilit and Rabbi Berger. Get going.
Hi, Barbara, welcome.
Hi there, sorry. Hello, Michaela.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, my darling.
Michaela's our inspiration, Barbara. She is so knowledgeable.
Well, she's known her for a few years. She's my other grandchild.
How are we doing time? Well, our experience is that people usually arrive on the hour. So sort of rushing.
Nothing like a frenzied entrance.
How are the kids doing at King David, Rabbi Berger?
You know what? The kids are doing much better. With the masks on, they tend not to talk so much in class.
Oh.
So it's.
I did not find that.
You don't find that at all?
No.
No, I found them more focused this year and less distracted.
They're grateful to be here. They're grateful.
And that's true too. They are actually, when everybody else isn't, they're happy to be here, and they're happy because they've experienced what it was like last year not to be. And they still resonates with them. So they're just happy to eat. They're happy to talk with their friends. They're happy to be in classes. And I think priorities are just different now. Yeah. And they're more open to other ideas and things,
I agree.
So,
yeah.
I'm sure somebody will do many studies on this later on and figure out how things shifted and changed during this thing and the benefits and the costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're lucky to be able to have all the schools open. That's the.
Yeah, the California schools are still closed.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, my mother just got her first shot in California, in Los Angeles, 2 days ago. So she's, well, I'll tell you her age. I don't think she'd appreciate that, but yeah.
Well, everyone I know in Israel has been vaccinated.
They're offering it to age 35 and up now. Anybody can go.
Gosh.
In
Unbelievable.
Israel. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
They're doing well. There are other things there that aren't going so good.
I think Israel is a unique case though, because they're being used as
Trial.
the trial.
thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Because I saw a cartoon from Israel where someone sent me, two mice that said, "Have you been hello, how are you? Have you been vaccinated yet?" And the one mouse said to the other, "No, we're waiting for the humans to finish the trial."
I saw that.
It's
So funny.
There's so many people ignoring the vaccine in Israel that it's big weddings, big parties, big everything. Not
Yeah.
good. That was diplomatic of me, wasn't it?
Hello.
Hi.
Oh,
Kayla, it looks like you're on twice.
Yeah.
You too, Rabbi.
Oh, yes. Look at that.
I think the other potato frame is Nadine. Hi, Nadine.
It's Nadine.
There you go.
So just a reminder that you might want to put yourself onto speaker view, to put your device onto speaker view, so that you can see the people who are presenting.
so many familiar faces. It's so nice to see everyone. I'm quite isolated. I'm either in my foods room or in.
Oh,
You're muted. You're muted.
That was bizarre. It just happened on its own. Anyway, it's lovely to see you all. Thank you for coming.
thank you.
I suggest we wait a few more minutes, Rabbi.
Yeah, why don't we give it 2 more minutes before we start?
Actually, the toughest part of being back in school is the smells emanating from the foods room that are coming out from Hilit's and her staff's cooking, the kids cooking.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to cross eat any longer because of the COVID. So I smell all these wonderful smells and I can't come in and taste. So,
No
that has been out.
sharing.
That has been that's been the hard part of the year.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Yeah, for me too, because I love sharing, right?
Yes.
So it's so hard for me when I have to tell the kids you can only consume what you make. You cannot taste other people's. And I always loved whatever there's left over. I love sharing with students out there. Can't do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it hurts. Yeah.
But we're doing a really good job at King David. The fact is that we've been able to isolate things when things went problematic, and we've been able to continue with school pretty much uninterrupted. So been really good.
Yeah. So I have to clarify something. In the PDF, it says, Rabbi Berger, that you'll be cooking with me. You're not, obviously. But maybe we will one day have like a little show, the cook and the sage.
When I can stand next to you. But today I'll just be cooking with the fire of Torah.
There you go.
Beautiful. So maybe we'll begin. For those of us who are here, I don't want to punish anyone who's on time. I want to begin by welcoming everyone and thank you for joining us. It is fabulous to have you here with us. I know that we have at least one person who's joined us all the way from Kelowna. I don't know if anyone's further than Kelowna. Jan is, I don't know, Jan lives in the neighborhood of Kelowna, Jan and Jack, but, and I want to say just how lucky we are to have Rabbi Berger and Hilit teaching us today. And, you know, I really consider Rabbi Berger to be truly one of the outstanding Jewish educators in the city of Vancouver, and has done incredible things with the Judaics curriculum, and is an incredible teacher at King David and at Beth Israel. We are exceedingly lucky to have him and teach our children and our families a few times a year. And so thank you, Rabbi Berger, for that. And now, I don't remember what was the day of the American election. It was November or something, right?
Yes.
So
6.
November 6th, was it?
Mhm.
What was the date? I don't remember. November 4th, 3rd, whatever the date was, that
Yeah.
Tuesday. The rest of the world was trying to figure out who was going to be the president of the United States, and da-da-da. In our house, the conversation, that was partly it, but there was a much more important topic, which was, what was Lion's Den, King David's big cooking event, going to, what foods were going, and what foods were people going to vote for? That
Yeah.
was the vote that was being, and I don't think there's ever a night at the Infeld-Weinberger home in which the conversation around what are they cooking and foods at King David doesn't occur, because Hilit has this incredible ability of inspiring children to cook and eat well. Now, that actually, and we want to thank her for not only what she does at King David, but also her many years as a dedicated member of Beth Israel, and all of her years of volunteering and helping to teach cooking at Beth Israel as well. So thank you, Hilit. So we are
Thank you.
very lucky to have the two of you joining us tonight. Today is a Tu B'Shvat program. And you might be wondering, how does Tu B'Shvat connect to food security? I mean, isn't Tu B'Shvat the birthday of the trees? Isn't that really what it is? Because that's what we've learned, right, since preschool, that Tu B'Shvat is the birthday of the trees. Here on Salt Spring Island, you can notice where, you know, we are well endowed with trees, but the reality is that Tu B'Shvat is not actually the birthday of trees. Tu B'Shvat is actually something significantly different. Tu B'Shvat is actually a day of taxation. It's like January 1st. In fact, the rabbis say in Mishnah Rosh Hashanah that there are 4 different possible days for New Year's. And then they actually debate one of those days in the month of Shvat. Maybe it's the beginning of Shvat, maybe it's the 15th of Shvat. And then they explain that when we say Rosh Hashanah, what we really mean a new year, it's really around when do we tax, when do we perform, when do we have a cutoff date for Truma and Masir, the donations to the temple and the donations to community. And one of those potential days is Tu B'Shvat, which is related to the taxation of our tree products. Now, when we tax tree products, we're not only, of course, presenting them to the temple, but we're presenting them essentially to the Jewish community as well, enabling those who need to eat. And so Tu B'Shvat is actually a reminder of the necessity, as we have at multiple points in Jewish law and in Jewish text, it is a reminder for us to take care of and be there for our community. And so when we were trying to figure out with our committee what is the most appropriate day in order to do programs and to make a day of food security, it just made sense that even though it was in the midst of my sabbatical, it made sense to do it on today, this day being Tu B'Shvat. And while talking about the committee, I'd like to thank our committee for their hard work before we launch and jump into our program. So I want to thank our 2 co-chairs, Wendy Klein and Michaela Frame, who did an excellent job of helping to lead us. Thank you, Michaela, and thank you, Wendy, who are here with us. And I want to thank Carol Hopkins and Christine McInnes, Cindy McMillan, and Naomi Matic for all of the many hours that they've dedicated to our to our committee and their hard work putting this all together. And of course, Nikki Fried for all of her incredibly hard work too. And I'd like to hand us over to Vancouver's, I would assume Vancouver's greatest, and certainly I know Vancouver's in the Jewish community's greatest cook and teacher education of teaching of cooking. I'd like to hand us over to Hilit, and Rabbi Berger and I, during the midst of the next hour, will banter back and forth, agreeing and maybe even disagreeing at some point too. I don't know about what, because I think we pretty much agree on almost everything, but we'll see.
All right. Well, thank you, Rabbi Infeld. So when you asked me to cook something today, I thought that a fitting dish would be a lentil soup. Lentils being such a fabulous staple, an easy staple, if you're talking about food security and feeding, having a goal of feeding everyone, everyone having good food, healthy food. Lentils are really, legumes in general and lentils specifically are so good. They're full of protein, they're super healthy. They are very inexpensive, very easy to store, and specifically these split red lentils are just so easy to cook. They're very fast. So if one doesn't have a lot of time, they're a really good option. They're also very, I don't want to use the word bland, but they will take up any flavor that you add to it. So you can make soups and stews and burger patties. They can really soak up anything that you add to them. So today I will start. I did all my prep ahead of time. So I'm just going to show it to you. Okay. So I think you have, it's kind of weird with the Zoom. So I'm just, I'm going to try move Zoom in and out so that you guys can see. So I've got my my onions, my carrots, and my celery. And I know I gave you quantities in the recipe, but what I usually look for is a mirepoix, which is another way of saying onions, carrots, and celery. 50% onions, 25 carrots, 25 celery. Someone came up with this formula. They say, you know, that this is a really, really good base, that very flavorful to almost anything, really. I've got my tomatoes, my lentils, and various aromatics and spices. I'm going to start with, I'm going to move my camera a little bit, with caramelizing my onions. So let's switch on the heat. Olive oil, it says a 1/4 cup, but you know, you'd want to coat the bottom of your pot. And my heat is on high. I want to actually get my oil hot. I don't want to get it to its smoking point. That's not the point. Just want to get it hot as fast as possible, because I know we are short in time. And as soon as it is hot, I will add the onions. With the onions, I'm going to caramelize them, extract all the sugars, the sugars that are naturally within the onions, and caramelize them. I really like to season as I go. So I have a small bowl of salt right next to me. There's, you know, people say salt at the very end. I like to season with every layer that that I add to the pot. That way I extract the most flavors out of everything that I put in there. All right, I think.
Hilit, there's a question on the board.
Oh, it's really hard for me to read the questions and cook. So why don't you tell me?
They're asking the question. It's from Jack and Jan, asking the question: what's the difference between green lentils and red lentils in taste and use?
So I find the green lentils are harder. They take longer to cook. And red lentils are much softer. They take much quicker to cook. The flavor is, it's a lentil flavor. Maybe green lentils are more earthy, and red lentils are nuttier, slightly nuttier. But green lentils definitely take longer than red lentils.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got my onions in the pot. I'm going to season with a pinch of salt. I just want to extract all the flavors, and that really brings the flavor out. And I'm also going to put some bay leaves. I know I put some bay leaves in the recipe. These are bay leaves from our very own King David garden. They are fresh. I just cut them a few hours ago, and they are so flavorful. They smell like bubble gum. I mean, they are so beautiful. So I'm just going to, as soon as they hit the oil, the aroma is unbelievable. All right, in they go. And when I caramelize onions, I don't know if you do it, but definitely my students, they like to constantly stir the pot. Well, I always tell them, if you constantly stir the pot, the onions are not going to get any contact with the heat. So just let it sit, let it caramelize, and then give it a stir. I'm looking for a kind of a light brown, okay? That kind of a caramel. So this is going to take a couple of minutes. Once my onions are light brown, I'm going to add my carrots. I'm going to, and a pinch of salt. I'm going to put them in there until they start sweating, until they get shiny. Then my celery, again, a pinch of salt, let them get sweaty and shiny. And then come in my lentils, my tomatoes, just giving you a preview. While this is happening, I think I'm going to pass it on to Rabbi Infeld and Rabbi Berger.
Can I ask a question, Hilit, quickly? A
Yes.
cooking question, and then I'm also happy to answer Rabbi Berger's question.
Okay.
Unless somebody else wants to. If you don't have bay leaves, is there another herb that you recommend?
You don't have to. If you don't have them, that's okay. I'm going to be adding some fresh thyme also from our garden. So that is super strong as well. So, that will give wonderful aroma to your soup. So
Okay.
if you don't have bay leaves, don't worry about it.
Okay.
This is very easy. This is my version, but honestly, you can play.
I have fresh sage. Will that taste okay or not good?
Sage, is so strong. You could try. I like sage for a more proteins, such as animal-based proteins, not so much as plant-based, because I find it's too overpowering. But try it.
Okay.
Why not?
Okay.
Okay.
You looking for someone to answer your question, Rabbi Berger, or you want to
So
wait for us to?
no takers. I have no takers as of yet. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Where do you
right.
All right.
Where do we find it, guys?
Jacob and Esav.
Ah, very good, Michaela. Right? Asaph says, pour some of that red stuff down my throat. Right? That's what he says. He just gets in from a hard day of hunting and he just wanted to eat at anything. And he's like, pour it. Don't even give it to me a fork. He just said, pour it down my throat. And that's when he actually sells his birthright, so to speak, for a bowl of lentil soup. So it must be a good lentil soup you're making over there, Hilit.
I hope so. Well,
Sell a birthright.
It's so delicious.
But I do remember reading something. Maybe you can confirm or deny. So I remember reading a commentary once on this particular thing, and it said that lentil soup actually gets darker when you cook it. It turns less red. It starts off red, more red, and then it becomes more brownish the longer you cook it. Is that true with our lentils that we had?
Well, they do get darker, but it's still red. I mean, they still they retain their color, but not as bright.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the author wanted to say that when it said pour me this red stuff, he was saying that it wasn't even fully cooked yet. That's how much of a pleasure-oriented guy Asaph was. He couldn't even wait for the thing to be cooked fully. It was still in its pristine red form. It hadn't turned into like a brown, but I don't know. This was an interesting commentary. I don't know. Now you've kind of denied that.
You know, I didn't completely deny it. It might get slightly darker, but suppose it's on the same spectrum.
That was it. Maybe it's a little impetuousness, just total pleasure right away. Doesn't even want to wait. So everybody should take that as a lesson. We should wait to taste and eat our creation until it's all done. Then you make a bracha, and then we'll eat it, and then that's what it'll be. Nice. Yeah.
Rabbi Berger, I have a question for you.
Okay.
A month or two ago, we were talking, and you said that this particular time period is an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh more than any other time. Would you mind telling us what you might mean by that, and how that may relate to feeding the hungry?
Well, you speaking about the COVID and things like that? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I wrote a little something in the King David newsletter that we don't. Thank God we don't get. For example, there's a mitzvah to get divorced. One of the 613 mitzvahs is to get divorced. Hopefully, none of us ever actually have to utilize that mitzvah. There's also a mitzvah to return a stolen object. But in order to return a stolen object, what do you have to do first? You got to steal that object. So therefore, it's one of the mitzvahs we hope not to have to do. So pikuach nefesh is also one of those mitzvahs that you hope to never have to do, because it means somebody's life is at risk, that you actually have to save it. And the reality is we're actually in a very interesting matzav right now, a situation where every day we actually get a chance to fulfill the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh. When you go outside and you're wearing your mask and you're following the instructions to the best of your ability and making sure you're cognizant in washing your hands, right? You're actually fulfilling that mitzvah, that huge mitzvah that you're actually allowed to sacrifice and break almost every other mitzvah in the Torah to fulfill that mitzvah, so to speak. We have an ample opportunity. We've had it for months now. And I don't think we realize that, is that we actually have the opportunity to fulfill that mitzvah all the time. And if you want to think about this, and I've been listening to the CBC and all the other, that food, people, the poor are getting poorer, and food is not available to them to the same way it was before. And the people are out of work, right? So people, my brother's talking to me in Vegas right now. There's so many people out of work from the gaming industries and things that haven't been able to get back to work at all. And people are living basically off of welfare. They're living off of things. And the attendance to food shelters and, food banks is just increasing dramatically. And here we are, we have a chance to really donate, to develop, to build, to deliver all sorts of things that are available to us. And these are all pikuach nefesh opportunities that unfortunately we have, but since we have them, it would be a shame to really miss out on them. And that's kind of, I think, what I was speaking about there, is that never before do we have such a regular opportunity to save lives or to protect lives, to shomer, to guard lives. Normally, it's not something we do on an everyday basis. And now it's just part of our regular existence. And we should really take that into account and realize that this is an opportunity in a certain sense for us that are safer, for us that are comfortable, to put ourselves out and to try and make sure that we, there's endless opportunities out there to help people right now. And we need to do it. Even the elderly who are shut in alone. I visit them and they're not in good shape. And, I just read, we're getting the vaccine. I don't know when we're getting the vaccine, reality is. I know that Canada's just developed their own vaccine that's going to be ready. It's in testing now. It'll be ready by the end of the year, they said. Well, that's the end of the year. I don't know why they're still developing it, but they're still developing it. We have this, we're in this for a longer haul in Canada. We need to make sure that we don't get tired and we don't drop the ball on this, because every day is another day where we can save lives. Hilit, are we ready for our next step?
Not really. My onions are ready, and I like to take my time with the onions. I don't want to burn them. The slower you cook the onions, the more sugar comes to the front and caramelizes. So the more flavor you have.
Slow cooking the onions.
But it smells so good. It's just like, caramelized onions is basically the promise of an amazing dish.
Zoom's got to work on that next. Getting smell.
I'm just going to show you what they look like. They're basically sweating. They haven't caramelized yet.
How done are those onions? What'd you say? Is that half done?
They're sweating. I don't really call them half done. They are sweaty.
Sweaty.
They are
Sweaty
shiny, and they're translucent. They're on their way to a golden brown. That will happen in the next couple of minutes.
Rabbi Berger, one of the things that I've heard from JFS, and I want to mention, of course, that today's program is also co-sponsored by the JFS, and one of the things that the JFS has noticed, even before COVID, and now kal v'chomer, all the more so post-COVID, is that basically every year, I believe that the numbers of people in the Jewish community who are accessing our food bank is doubling. And we have successfully been able, thankfully, so far to keep up with, as a community, those who are in need. But it's not easy. And we keep on doubling the amount of food that we're providing, but those numbers keep on doubling as well. It's extremely concerning.
Yeah, it is. It is very concerning. It's continuing to grow and grow, and there's no end to it, because the people that need the money aren't able to work again. The lower paying jobs aren't able to. The waiters and waitresses and the regular people are just not able to work. Yeah. So I'll tell you one of the things about the food bank. We volunteer at the food bank at King David does. We go there and we help set up and we help put it away when it was very close to us. And one of the things I was very happy about at the food bank was they actually turned it into more of a store. Instead of getting a package or prepackaged thing with a box or whatever it be, you go through, it'd be like a shopping experience. And I know when we did Rack Week and we worked at some of the places, the food banks and some of the places in downtown, they really make it feel like it's an experience, like a shopping experience. It feels much less like a handout and much more like a shopping experience. And I'll tell you a little story which made that idea so powerful to me. Is I was young. I think I must have been around 15 or 16 years old. And I was running to catch a bus. I was going to summer school, and summer school was far away from where I was living, near my friend's house. And I was running to catch the bus. And I'm cutting through a parking lot of a Safeway or one of these markets. And there's a guy there, a homeless guy, who says to me, buddy, hey, kid, can you go get me something? Can you get me some milk? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm running to the bus, I'm late. He wants milk. I'll be happy to get him some milk. So I said, you know what? I'm going to run in and grab him some milk. So I ran in and I grabbed him some milk. And I get to the counter, though. I get to the back, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I forgot to ask a question. Which question did I forget to ask? Well, there's non-fat milk. There's full fat milk. There's 1% milk, 2% milk, lactose-free milk. And I'm like, oh man, I don't have time to go ask him, whatever it may be. So I just said, you know what? Here's a guy who's homeless. I was using my logical deduction. And I said, he's going to want that full fat milk, the full milk, experience. If he wants to water it down, he'll water it down. That's what I do. And I bought him some milk. And I felt really good about myself. And I delivered it to him. Was going to still make my bus, hopefully. And I give him the milk. And he says to me, wait, kid, I want non-fat milk. And I was like, oh. I said, here's the receipt. Go into the store and they'll exchange it for you. And he says, they won't let me in the store. So I said, I really don't have time. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I already did a nice thing here. Like, come on, like, why are you hocking me so much? So you know what he did? He took the milk and he threw the milk at me. He threw the milk at me and it landed on the ground just in front of me and exploded and got all over me. And I'm thinking to myself, no good deed goes unpunished kind of thing. And I said, once I was talking to a rabbi many years later, and I brought up this story. And I said to him, I said, this is why people don't like to give. Because people, you give and then they're not grateful. And my rabbi looked at me and he started shaking his head and he said, you don't understand. You missed the whole pshat. You missed the whole thing. This guy didn't want milk. He wanted his ability to be able to choose. He said, when you're poor and when you're needy, you're always reliant on other people and what they're willing to give you. The rabbis talk about this. They say a poor person's like a dead person. They have no control over their own life. They're not insulting the poor person. They're saying they have no control over their life. And that is what people want. They want the ability to choose. That is part of this idea of providing food for them. It isn't just for sustenance. It's providing them, in a sense, ability to live like a human being would want to live. And Judaism is very important on this. We make sure to provide the charity that a person needs in order to feel like a mensch. If a person was wealthy and became poor, he gets a little bit more money for what a person needs. But more than, or maybe as much as the food is needed itself, is to give the ability to the person to choose what it is that they're eating, to make it for themselves, so they don't feel they're just getting it for people. And it's a lesson that's always stuck with me throughout the years, especially when my rabbi re-explained it to me more than 25 years later. It took me that long to just mature a little bit and see it. But I see that in my life very often now, is that part of providing food isn't just the providing of the food. It's giving a person an ability to have the choice of what they're eating and making sure they're eating things that are not just what you're willing to give them, unhealthy something, whatever it is, but providing them something that gives them sustenance and life. So just one of those things. I think Shammai even perhaps says it best and Rambam says it, that if you give somebody something and you don't give it with a smile, or you don't give it with a sense that you want to give it, in a sense, right? And give the ability of this, that it's not really, it undermines the whole giving process in itself. So we have to be very careful, not just to give, but it's a harder mitzvah. It's a mitzvah, it's how you give as well, and how you let them, and how they take. So it's something to perhaps consider there a little bit as we're talking about food safety and food security, right? And part of the security is letting a person choose what it is that they want to eat. And I'm really happy that our food bank has kind of moved to that model. And in the future plans, I think are even moving more to that model, which I think it provides dignity for people as well. Human dignity is one of the biggest concepts in Judaism. So I'm glad that even in our giving, it isn't just for, sustenance, it's actually for dignity as well.
So it's really about recognizing the humanity of a human being.
Yeah, that's it.
And by the way, and it's not just recognizing the humanity, but unfortunately, one of the things that we have, one of our greatest issues today in feeding those who are hungry is that it's unhealthy food is much less expensive these days. So it's really a matter of providing people with healthy food and making sure that everyone has access not just to food, period, but recognizing the humanity of people means recognizing that they are receiving vegetables. And if you notice what Hilit is making, she not only makes great tasting food in a fascinating way, but it's also, this is a healthy dish as well. Even
her cakes are healthy.
Yes.
No, but it's true. It's
Cakes a cake.
I walked into Safeway and I went in to buy, my wife wanted a butternut squash. And there was a guy in front of me who was buying a whole dinner, all just a bunch of junk food and pre-processed this and that. And he had a meal for 3 people there. And my one butternut squash cost more than his meal for 3 people.
It's true.
It was great. And it was
so sad.
That's very sad to think that the raw materials of these things to provide healthy things, it's unfortunate that the incentive wise to buy cheap junk food, when people can't afford it too, there's a big incentive to do that, right? So
The next question we're going to ask you to answer, Rabbi, is about giving with a smile. But before we do that, let's ask Hilit if she has any words of cooking wisdom.
Yes, so
yes.
what I did, my onions were golden brown. I added the carrots and spreaded them a bit. I also added bird's eye chili that I used a dry one. We grew them a couple of years ago and dried them. So I used scissors to cut it into my onions. But if you're using the fresh kind, you can just chop it on a cutting board. Please make sure to wear gloves if you're going to touch the chili. It is so spicy. You will, anything you touch, your skin will burn and it doesn't come off for days. You can wash your hands over and over again. It will still burn you. So wear gloves if you're going to handle the chili. Otherwise, just hold it at the stem and use scissors so that you're not actually handling it. The hottest part, of course, are the seeds and the veins. So if you're actually dealing with it, cutting it, chopping it, just don't touch that.
So the stem, there's no heat to the stem then?
No heat to the stem, no.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, yeah. And that's it. So now I'm not waiting. And of course, I seasoned with a pinch of salt with every addition to the pot. Look how colorful it is already. It's so beautiful. I'm waiting just another couple of minutes to let the carrots and the celery sweat a little bit more. And then I'll add the tomatoes, the lentils, the cumin, and the garlic. The garlic I'm going to use two ways. I'm going to press some garlic into the vegetables and allow it to caramelize as well. So we'll get like a sweeter version of the garlic. And then I'm going to press a clove at the very end once the soup is totally finished. And then I'll get a very strong, spicy garlic. So I'm using it in two different ways. Okay, so I'm going to let you carry on. Next step is
Can I ask a question for Hilit? The order you're putting things in, is it because there is a method to this, right? The things that are harder to cook go in first, but the onions are there to flavor everything?
Yes.
What's the order of these things?
So onions always first. They won't caramelize if there's too much moisture in the pot, right? So you'll see the onions as they start to cook. You'll see a lot of steam coming out. The water cooks out, and only once the water cooks out, the caramel can form.
Got it.
And then once it is golden brown, I add the harder vegetables, which is the carrot and then the celery and tomatoes. Obviously, they cook very easily. So
what about peppers? Would you put peppers with onion, or would peppers go in afterwards?
no, onions are always by themselves first, always. Okay. And then only when they're caramelized do I add the rest. But peppers are also quite hard, so I would add them, after the carrots, before the celery. Okay, I'm now going to crush some garlic in there. I love a lot of garlic. Some people don't. So the amount of garlic that I suggested is my favorite. But if you don't like as much garlic, you don't have to.
Whoa.
So because we're not allowed to share, this is my lunch for the next week.
I often put in garlic early on. Is that a mistake?
No, it's just a different, you'll get a different profile of garlic. You'll get, you know, it's, so garlic is tricky because when if it burns, it becomes very bitter. So just make sure that it doesn't burn. And you'll get kind of a, if you let it, if there's a little bit of water in there, which there isn't now, you'll get kind of the sweetness, the sugars of the garlic will caramelize, you get the sweetness of the garlic. Whereas when I put it at the very end, it just creates, gives it its spiciness. We're not going to get its spiciness now. We're going to get sweetness, sweet garlic.
Huh.
Later, we'll get a spicy garlic.
So you'll put more garlic in later.
Yes, at the very end, once it's totally ready.
Interesting.
All right, look at this. So beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I'm going to add the cumin, a little bit of salt, and the lentils. Now, of salt. Now, I'm going to add water.
How do you know how much water to add?
4 or 5 cups. So the nice thing about this dish really is it can be a soup, but it can also be a stew. If you let it, most of the water, you know, evaporate, or actually it soaks into the lentils, then you are left with a thick stew, which you can eat over rice, which is so delicious. All right, so now I'm going to take the thyme, also from our garden. And you can separate the leaves from the stems, and you can take time to do that. I don't feel like doing that. It's a lot of work. So I'm going to tie it with kitchen twine, just like this.
It's all been checked for bugs.
Of course, and washed, triple washed, quadruple washed, promise. Okay, and I'm just gonna toss it into my pot, just like that. I closed the computer. Sorry. Sorry about that. There you go. I'm just gonna throw it in there. And if I don't use the twine, I'll just have to fish out the stems later on. The leaves will just naturally fall off of the stem and into the soup, but I'll be left with the stems. You shouldn't really eat the stems. These are very hardy stems. I tell my students that I once had one of these stems stuck in my throat. I had to operate on myself to get it out of there. It was not pleasant. So that's why either separate the leaves from the stems, or they tie them with a twine that you can actually just take out of there when you're done with it. At this point, I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of salt, and I want it to come to a boil, so I will put the lid on and wait for it to come to a boil. Then once it comes to a boil, I'm going to turn it down to a simmer and let it cook. And the question is, how long do I let it cook for? The answer is until the vegetables are soft. The lentils will probably soften before the vegetables. These cook very, very fast. And that's that. So now all we have to do is wait.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have a guess on the time of how long it usually takes?
Say 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Rabbi Berger, do you want to maybe answer Michaela's question?
Sure. So Michaela had a question here on the chat that says, what does it mean by giving with a smile? So the Rambam says, the famous doctor writes, and he says in his halacha, his Jewish law book, he writes from the opposite way. He says, if you give, normally if you give tzedakah, that's the mitzvah itself. You're doing good by giving the money. But he says you can negate the whole thing you're doing if you give with a like begrudgingly, and the person sees that you're giving begrudgingly. So even though he says that you gave the mitzvah, you did the thing, you gave them the money, they're going to benefit from it, right? But he says ultimately that you've lost out, you've missed it, you get nothing for that mitzvah, because the mitzvah is part of the mitzvah is to help somebody. And when you basically cause his soul to drop, the dignity to be lost in the person, you've done basically a sin, you've done a transgression that has overridden any good that you can do. Hard to believe because you still gave him some money, right? But if you do it begrudgingly and with a hard heart, in a sense, where the person notices it, maybe that's the reason we give. Maybe that's a good reason why we give anonymously. They can't see your heavy heart when you're giving for some people, and therefore, you don't get disqualified from the gift. So it's an interesting idea. Yes, like a football field, exactly, Michaela. We learned that. Michaela was a student of mine, fellow student, and in grade 11. Wow, she's good memory there. So one more thing I guess I wanted to discuss tonight while we're waiting for the thing to boil is there's something in this week's Parsha that affects, I think, everything. I think there's a big picture, and I think that if I can set it up this way, the Torah is a very radical book. It just wasn't radical back then. It's extremely radical today. And I'll try and show you exactly how radical it is. So in this week's Parsha, we have a mitzvah that's going to pertain to food security and pertain to a lot of things. The Jews needed food security because they were leaving Egypt, the breadbasket of the Middle East, and heading into a desert. I don't know if you guys know deserts, but I can tell you I used to make the drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas all the time. I liked playing craps a lot when I was younger. And in any event, I made the drive many, many times. And one of the times I was driving, you forget about these things, but, your car breaks down and suddenly you realize you didn't plan for that. And now you're in the middle of a desert and nobody's stopping for you. And maybe there's not a lot of people driving by you. And it's like 110 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And there's no way to walk to the next thing. And you begin to wonder, this was before the days of cell phone. I began to realize, I didn't think about this, but I'm in bad shape here in this sense. And sure enough, about 10 minutes later, a police officer comes by and he stops to help me out. And I said, boy, I'm lucky you're here. He says, no, you're not lucky. We do this. We drive by looking for people like you every 20 minutes to make sure nobody's on the side of the road, didn't bring water and don't die on us. So I was like, oh, that's really a nice service. Thank you very much. So the Jews are leaving basically Egypt. They got their matzahs on their back, but they don't have much in the way of food that's going to sustain them in the desert for so long. I don't think they did, what's it called? What's that hobby people do with making the jars of fruits and things like that ready to go? They didn't pack. They were not ready. And they're going out in the deserts and they're following out there and there's no food security out in the deserts. None. So what does God do for them? It's a paradigm mitzvah. He gives them manna. What is manna? So manna, I want to explain, it's like it comes like the Gremlins. Anyone see the movie Gremlins? Little gremlins, long time ago, these little creatures. Well, Gremlins had 3 rules. There's 3 rules you can do with Gremlins. One is you can't get them wet and etc. So the manna also came with 3 rules. It was the first laws we actually got from God. Before there was a Torah, before Mount Sinai, there were 3 rules. One rule was, actually, maybe, does anybody know what the 3 rules of manna were? I'll throw it out to you guys. You can throw it on the chat or throw it on the Zoom. Just unmute yourself. And you want to shout out, what are the 3 rules that go with the manna? One per day. Oh, very good. So Michaela's got 1 per day. So don't gather more than you need. So that's it. Everybody's supposed to take an omer, like the counting of the omer. The only other place we see the word omer is you're supposed to take 1 omer's amount of manna. That's it. That's what you got. Enough to fill you was 1 portion. And by the way, did the people take only 1 manna? The answer is no, they failed that test. They took more than the 1 manna. And what happened to that manna that they took an extra of? Well, they get back to their place and they'd open up their sack and they'd start counting and they realize they only had 1 manna. Somehow the manna mysteriously disappeared. So if somebody was only able to collect a half a manna because someone else took a full one or 1.5, then by the time he got back, that manna would automatically be transferred over to the person that only was able to collect the half manna. So that's it. You're only allowed 1 per day. Okay, good. That's 1 rule. There's 2 more rules. Oh, Michaela. Oh, you're doing my heart well, Michaela. You're allowed to collect more than 1 manna before Shabbat. Matter of fact, that is how we know when Shabbat fell, because Friday would always be 2 mannas. 2 mannas would fall before Shabbat. And you were allowed that 1 day to collect 2 because why? You're not allowed to collect on Shabbat. There's no going out and collecting and taking and picking up on Shabbat. That was the first rule we got about Shabbat, no collecting on Shabbat. So that's the second rule, is that you can only collect 1, except for Friday, Yom Shishi, where you can collect 2, right? And therefore you're allowed to have the 2 because you have 1. And by the way, that's the source for us having 2 challahs on Friday night, right? Ever we have 2 challahs on our thing? It's about the double portion of manna. That's where we get the idea from. There's a 3rd rule. Anyone know the 3rd rule? No sharing? That's a mean one. No, that's not a rule. No sharing. That'd be my little kid. No sharing. 1 per person. God, we got 1 per person. She's guessing. I'm glad she's guessing. More people should guess. What's the last rule? You can't do what? You can't, no leftovers. Very good. You can't leave it overnight. If you left it open for the next day, it turned moldy and wormy and it was no good the next day. So what is this? What is this miracle being done in a really, besides otherwise than food security? What is going on here with this idea? So what is being taught with these ideas? Well, here, I think this is the idea, is this. You know, when I was traveling, I have an RV, and I like taking the RV down south, and there were some fires and some traffic, so I got off, and there was this weird mining, it wasn't a mining, it was a lumber, it was like a lumber, what's it called, old mill, where the lumberjacks were living there. It was just during the time, and they had a recreation with all the old machinery and the things, and we decided to take a time out in our drive. We stopped there for a couple hours. My kids kind of groan when we do it because, oh no, Abba's got his own, we're going to go learn something now. So we get out of this thing. We're going around learning how the lumberjacks lived, hundreds of years ago. And we're walking around. It's really quite cool. Even my kids are begrudgingly saying, like, this is kind of neat. And then we walk into the old recreation of the mess hall. And on the board, they have the menu, like an old menu of what these people used to eat. And if you take a look at that, it was like a full menu, like it was like a menu, but it wasn't like you picked what you wanted on the menu. Everything was served. That was like the breakfast menu. It was eggs. It was flapjacks. It was French toast. It was meats. You had meat. You had ground beef. You had the sausages. You had grits. You had malto meal, whatever those things there. You had bread, and you had all sorts of fruits and like all sorts of things there. And I was like, wow, these people really, really ate well. It ate well. Like this is a great life. And then I began to read, why was it that they ate so well? And the answer is, unlike most of us, who I'm trying to get on my treadmill right now, just to get a little activity in my life, most of my life is sat down at a table, at a desk, on a laptop, whatever it may be. These people would be eating so much, 3,000 calories, that they would burn off by lunch. That's what they did. When the Jews said, we want to go back to Egypt, we had food there, they're not lying. Pharaoh fed them. But why did Pharaoh feed them? Pharaoh fed them because the same way these lumberjacks, the company feeds the lumberjacks. Why do they feed the lumberjacks? Okay, to be a little bit happy, but also because they have to work hard and they're going to burn off all that energy, all that food they're going to need to get the most work out of them. So Pharaoh too, the food was all about getting them out to work, going out and collecting. They went to collect the straw and going out to collect, and bring things back for Pharaoh. Well, these laws of manna are going to teach us a new paradigm of what it means to be connected to God instead of being connected to Pharaoh. What does it mean? One, you can't keep it overnight. A slave keeps food overnight. We know in the Holocaust, people kept food. Why did they keep food? Why did they hoard food? Because they never knew where their next meal is going to be. They never knew, it was never guaranteed. People out in the deserts, they don't know God. They're the first time they've met God in their entire life. They don't trust yet. They haven't learned how to trust, right? That if I don't leave a little bit now, I'll leave it for tomorrow just in case. God says, no, don't look at me like Pharaoh. I'm always going to be there to provide for you. In this sense, this is it. This is it. Second rule, don't go out and collect on Shabbat. Pharaoh wanted them out collecting every single day. You are not a product of what you make. You deserve to be fed even if you're resting, even if you're not providing. In the lumberjack camp, I'm not sure how they fed them on their day off, if they got fed the same way. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I couldn't find out. But Pharaoh probably certainly didn't feed them that way, right, in that sense. So therefore, really, God says, no, you get to take a day off. You get to take a day off, right? In that sense. Shabbat is that idea that you get fed twice the day before to give you security in the sense, knowing that you don't have to collect on Shabbat. And you're never going to have to go out and take somebody else's. You go out and take more than your share, you're going to end up with just your share. You have to trust that it's going to be there for you. Don't take more than one. You take more than one, it's going to end up one. And the person who's ended up getting less than one, he's going to get one. That's social justice right there. God's teaching a very powerful lesson. As soon as the man stops when? When we're going into the land of Israel. That's when the man stops. And we get two laws. You know what laws we get? We get the laws there and it's in the section you'll see, two laws of something called leket and something called peah. And by the way, when you picked up the manna, it was called laket et haman. You laket from the same word, laket. What does it mean? That God said, listen, I'm no longer providing you the manna, so to speak. You have to provide the manna. These lessons that you internalize these 40 years in the deserts, when you go in there and you make your own land, you start farming the land, you have to leave the corner for the poor person. You leave the corner and you let them pick. Why do you let them pick? Because there's dignity in picking. You're not picking it and giving it to them. You got to let them pick, right? Things that you drop, you don't pick up. You leave it behind. That's called leket. In other words, you don't need to collect everything. You collect your share, but you leave the share for others. The people are now commanded. What God did for the people in the deserts, the landowners now have to do for people who end up being poor. And that's the mitzvah we get of Meiser here. The whole mitzvah of trees and all these things of Meiser and taking these things and providing for them. By the way, what is Shemitah? Shemitah is this exact idea of justice, right? That you're basically everybody during Shemitah year is allowed to go onto your land. The land has a rest. Reminding the land is not yours. The land is ultimately God's. And therefore, it allows you to go onto somebody's land and actually pick from his tree without getting permission to do so. It reminds you that land is not 100% yours. And it's really yours in order to do justice with it. And I think these lessons of food security from the man, leading down to all the agricultural laws that come in, and we didn't even talk about Shemitah and Yovel, really, with debt forgiveness and all the other stuff as well, which are even more radical in that sense. But we begin to think of our stuff that we have as ours. And the Torah always wants to remind you, it's not really yours. You have an obligation. You have an obligation to help others with it, right? And that is really what we really try to do. You try and remind people they have an obligation. That doesn't mean I'm reallocating. I don't know if I could take your stuff and give it to somebody else. But we have to inspire people to realize people who have their share, they need to share their share with somebody else. Everybody takes their one portion. And they got to make sure that the other people have enough for their portion as well. Taking more, from the lesson of the man, we learned that that's not what we should be doing. And I think that's really I think I've gone a little bit over time here, Rabbi, so I apologize on this. And I'm sure our food is ready.
Beautiful. So. Yeah, let's go. Thank you, Rabbi Berger. Let's go to Hilit and then we'll wrap it up.
It is ready. I just, one thing I forgot to mention, I added just a pinch of sugar just to offset the acidity of the tomatoes, literally just a tiny little pinch. And then I now added the some more salt. I tasted it and I felt I needed to adjust the seasoning, and I crushed the extra garlic that I kept for later, and this is ready. It is so quick and it is so, I wish you could.
Can we see it?
Yeah, definitely.
And anybody else who cooked, can you guys show us your version if you guys were able to turn on your videos?
Beautiful.
Okay. And so you can see it's quite thick. I added a little bit more water towards the end because I wanted it more of a soup, but if I left it, I could have just had
oh, look at Karen. She's got her up there. She's very similar. Look at that.
Very nice.
Oh, wonderful.
Very nice. And one thing I always like to add, lentils love lemon juice. So just before I serve it, I take some lemon and I squeeze it just like that. It brightens it up. It adds vitamin C. It is absolutely delightful. And that's it. I wish you were here to share it with me.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Berger. Thank you, Hilit. You know, in the Mishnah it says mitzvah gereret mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another, and that is both, I believe, reflective of reality and needs to be prescriptive as well. So what we would like to do as a thank you to you, to each of the two of you, is first of all allow one mitzvah to lead to another. So Congregation Beth Israel, on behalf of and in honor of each of the two of you, is going to make $100 donation in honor of each of the two of you to the JFS, to the food bank. That's number one. Number two is Hilit, of course, is a fabulous cook, and I don't know about Rabbi Berger, but I know Sarah is very well known. I'm sure you do well too, Rabbi Berger.
Doesn't let me in the kitchen anymore.
But I'm not sure if you need to, because we know about Sarah's ability, and well known in the community as well. And so we have a member of our synagogue, Peter Sarganis, who is an artist, and one of the things that he does is he makes spoons, and so we will be dropping off to each of the two of you one of his spoons.
That's so lovely. Thank you.
Connection to as a thank you.
It's very thoughtful. Thank you.
So again, thank you to the two of you. Thank you to King David. Thank you to JFS, and thank you to our committee. And please join us this evening for a panel discussion on this important topic. And of course, I want to thank Nikki, if I didn't before, for all of her hard work. And I also saw that before that Chuck was, oh, there he is. Chuck Partridge is on as well. helping to be our producer and security for this event. So thank you to Chuck, and thank you to all for joining us. And B'Te'avon, and
Thank you.
Chag Sameach, as we are celebrating this wonderful Tu B'Shvat. So,
Chag Sameach, everybody.
Yeah.
Very nice.
bye-bye.
Thanks, yeah, enjoy.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
חג שמח, תודה רבה.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Nikki. That was great.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't cooking, obviously, because I was.
Yeah, I was listening. It was so good.
Thanks, Nikki, for organizing. It was fantastic. Well done, Hilit.
Thank you, Wendy. How did it turn out?
Oh, it is. I just added a handful of spinach because I have to get in my iron.
Yeah, yeah.
It is delicious, and I've actually decided I'm going to let the water evaporate, and it's going to be more of a stew.
Yeah.
It is delicious. I have to show you. I wish you could smell it.
Can we see it?
I'm nervous to add more garlic in because I don't want to ruin it.
Well, it's up to you. I love garlic, so to me, the more the merrier.
Delicious.
But it looks beautiful. I love the spinach in there. I'm gonna do that too. Wendy.
Yeah, very nice.
Thank
Thank you guys for the opportunity here. It's been a lot of fun.
Idea.
Thank you. I think it was a wonderful format. It was so good with the cooking and the chatting. I really thought it was fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Please, you ready for a reality show yet?
I'm ready.
Okay.
That's good.
Maybe you're launching a new career, Rabbi.
You can do it.
Hilit, I would love to cook with you any night. It was such fun to have someone to do it with. It just made it so much more exciting.
It is so much nicer.
It is.
Absolutely.
It's lovely to having chat going whilst the cooking, because it just makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask a very quick technical question?
Yes.
Does it make a difference if you use dry bay leaves?
No, definitely not. No, so what I do, I pick them and I leave them without water in the jar, and basically within 10 days they're dry, and then I jar them. So it doesn't matter.
I didn't even know you could even get fresh bay leaves if you didn't grow them yourself.
Yeah, they look gorgeous.
They grow, you know where our apple orchard is?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the hedge.
Okay. See, I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't even know what a bay leaf looked like in real life.
Like this, and it
they look gorgeous.
The aroma is unbelievable. Like you crunch it a little bit, it's phenomenal. It's like nothing you've ever smelt.
Carol, we're going to go for and forage.
Yeah, we got to do that.
There's so much of it. I'm sure no one will miss it. Amazing.
It was lovely. Thank you, Hilit.
Okay, thank you. B'Te'avon.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Noni. Bye.
Pretty.